I think so much of, the profession of farming is also tied to the identity of being a farmer that it's kind of hard to take a step back and say like, okay, this is great and I'm doing this and some things need to change. Like this could be better. And I would say the biggest advice, which I still need to take myself. So like I'm a little preachy right now, but it's like, it's okay to do both. It's okay to have an off farm job or a job and still be farming. That doesn't mean that you're not that you're failing, that you're not doing it correctly. It just means that this is the realities of the profession and the scale that we're choosing to do.
A movement is underway of people abandoning the emotional, physical, and financial expenses of city living and crafting their own purpose, livelihoods, and joy in the rural reaches. The Urban Exodus podcast shares the wisdom, wit, and stories of those who decided to embark on the road less traveled to pursue their own interpretation of the good life. Small business owners, change makers, artists, farmers, and more, working towards building a better future for themselves and their fellow citizens. This podcast is for country dreamers, rural folk, and urban dwellers alike who want to feel more connected to the natural world and the purpose and choices in their lives. I'm Melissa Hessler. Welcome to the Urban Exodus. I'm excited to invite you to my conversation with Helena Sylvester, the farmer and creative force behind Happy Acre Farm and Harvest Queen. Happy Acre Farm is located in the rolling hills of Sunol, California. Helena and her partner Matthew started farming after binge watching a bunch of eye-opening documentaries about our food system. They wanted to know where their food came from, and they wanted to provide healthy food for others. They built their farm on 1 acre of rented land in the Sunol AgPark. We visited Helena and Matt in the winter of 2019 when she was 7 months pregnant with their son August. It was an exciting but stressful time as the couple considered their farming future with a new baby. Although it is a constant juggling act, Helena has found creative ways to make it work. She now works part-time on the farm and part-time on the brand team at Carhartt, a role she pitched to the company after working as a brand ambassador for them. In addition, she continues to build Harvest Queen, a passion project encouraging people to eat seasonally and support their local farmers. Welcome, Helena Sylvester. It's such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I met you back in, I want to say it was before August was born. You were pregnant. When was that? I think it was November of 2019.
To be honest, I was filling out a preschool application and they asked for his birthday and I was like, oh man, I know how old he is, but I do not know the year he was born. I think it's 2018.
Did I have my child like in a backpack when I was photographing your shoot, or did Jake?
Yes,
I think I must have.
She was super tiny. Yes.
Okay. All right. So yeah, that 2018 makes a lot of sense. First off, I have just admired you guys for a really long time. It was such an honor to get to see you both and meet you and get to tour your farm. And for anyone that doesn't know about you, I'd love for you to just share a little bit of your personal backstory, where you grew up, how you met your partner, and why you two decided to start farming.
I grew up in Oakland, born and raised. I was actually born at the same hospital as my mom, and August was born there too. So it's like we got long lines. And Matt, my partner, husband, was also born and raised in Oakland. We met officially, in 2009 after I graduated college. My goal was to move to Hawaii with my best friend at the end of the summer. And so I was working 3 different jobs, just trying to make as much money as possible. And at one of the jobs, I was a food runner and Matt was a server there. You know, that always happens when you're like not looking for anything serious. And then boom, there goes the one.
It's crazy that you didn't meet when you were both living in Oakland, that you both grew up in Oakland. Were you just paths didn't cross, or?
When I was in high school, he was working at this deli, and I used to go there on like the days that we got off early to get a sandwich with my friend. And there was always like this cute guy who had his ear pierced and would like rap out your sandwich orders. It wasn't until I met him later and then we were talking about like the jobs that we had had before that he said he worked there. And I was like, whoa, I had a crush on you in high school.
So you are both working at this restaurant. You're planning on going to Hawaii. You run into him for maybe the second time, and it seems like it's kind of meant to be. What happens from there?
We just kind of started spending all of our free time together. And then in the end of October, I moved to Hawaii with my friend. And within 3 months, I think I had asked him to come out and join us. So there was 3 of us living in a studio apartment in Waikiki. It was pretty cramped, but it was really fun.
Once you were in Hawaii, that was where you first got your start in farming, right? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is, oh man. So we smoked a lot of weed when we were in Hawaii, and we would just kind of like get high and watch food documentaries, which I can't really say I recommend it because they were pretty intense. And it like, we had watched enough of them that we were just like, all right, we got to figure out how to do this for ourselves. My friend had told me that she had gone woofing, and she had kind of phrased it like, I got to go to Costa Rica and I got to stay someplace for free. And so, you know, being 21, not having money, it was like, how can we do this and make it happen? And so we wound up woofing on the Big Island at 2 separate places. And, you know, they weren't great experiences, to be honest. I don't want to like knock woofing in general, but I just will say like we didn't have a good experience with the program. And from there, we kind of came back to California. From there, we came back and I was just like jonesing to farm. I wanted to grow anything, anywhere. I wanted like 40 acres and 2 tractors, and I had no idea what I was doing. So I got a little break when my high school science teacher, or maybe religion teacher, oh man, if she hears this, she's going to be upset, found out that I was interested in farming. And so they were trying to develop their school garden at the time. And they had like an abandoned tennis court, and the parents had bought them maybe like a 5x8 greenhouse or something, one of those kits that you can put together yourself. And she was like, okay, here you go. And so Matt and I would like scour Craigslist for free stuff. And we were able to kind of like build and care for that school garden for a while. And from there, we started our own company, like building raised beds for people, kind of turning in California, it's like really common to just have like a small strip of grass between your sidewalk and the road, or like right next to your car in the driveway. So we would work on turning those into like little garden areas for people.
The health strip, right?
Yeah, it's like such a random strip. I don't really understand it. And then from there, I was on Craigslist all the time and just Googling like farm jobs, all that kind of stuff. And I was still living in Oakland, and most of the farm jobs were in like the Sacramento area. So to commute there wasn't really realistic. That's about 2 hours, 2.5 hours away. I found one that was just 45 minutes away, and that sounded like such a win. And that turned out to be the farm I worked on for the next 3 years.
When did you and Matt decide to start farming on your own? And how did you go about getting your farm business off the ground?
So after 3 years with this farm, I was like ready to grow within their business, but it was a husband-wife couple who owned it. They had 2 employees besides me, and there just like wasn't a lot of room to grow. So it was kind of like we left on good terms, kind of knowing, and like to this day, they are our mentors, and we're able to like call them for stuff, which is really helpful. And then there was like a winter to spring that I took off, and I'm using quotes to do that because I started a jam business called Jam On. Since I knew so many farmers, they would just give me their fruit at the end of the day that they didn't sell if it wasn't good enough to sell the next day for free. And so I was able to preserve that and sell it as jam using the Cottage Food Act. I was able to do it out of our house. And with that, I was able to kind of like stash away enough money for basic farm expenses for when we started, because we didn't like have a big savings or anything. We just, we were like scraping by, and then we're like, okay, it's time to go. And we found our land in a pretty, let's see, Matt was, at that time, he was a farmer's market manager. So he had gotten a call from a 925 area code, which is like local in our region. And he was just like, where's your farm? And this guy said, oh, it's at the Sunol AgPark. There's actually an acre open. You should come check it out. And then I think like 2 months later, we signed the lease on it.
So you are on your first acre of land, you're leasing it. What's that first year like? If you could look back on kind of the early days of your business, what advice would you give to other people who are just starting out?
I guess I would just say, like, what mistakes didn't we make? You know, like I was taking knowledge that was applicable to 15 acres and trying to apply it to 1 acre. So like paring down the plantings, first of all, like only planting one 72 cell tray of peppers instead of like 12 at a time was really mentally challenging for me. But I think the mistakes were good at the same time, because they really helped. At least I learn well that way. Like I don't really learn from reading, like I don't really retain it if I read something. Like I have to go do it with my hands, and it really makes a difference.
How did you first start off your model of building up your customer base? How did you find your first customers? And what advice would you have for others who are trying to kind of find a market for their produce?
Our first customers were kind of our friends and our parents' friends. Like we were marketing to the area that we had grown up in. And so there was just a lot of people there. It was like my aunt would talk to all her neighbors and they would sign up. At first, we didn't do a CSA. I think year one, we just did like weekly one-off boxes. And I couldn't even afford boxes. So we were just using big brown paper bags. And a lot of those people who started then are still our customers today, which is pretty cool. But it was just week by week. And we would, like, Instagram wasn't necessarily a place that we were getting customers at that point. It was just a way to show our family and friends what we were doing. So we were like making postcards and dropping them off at coffee shops or libraries, anywhere that we could kind of like leave something without soliciting. And I think these days, Instagram is just, it's such an amazing platform for marketing yourself.
Do you feel like you have built your customer base from that now, or has it made it easier on your business just from a local perspective?
Yes. Yeah, I guess. I think like we didn't really see any people from social media translating to customers for probably like our first 8 years. It was more just interacting with other farmers or farmers markets associations. Like it was just kind of our own little niche corner of the internet that we could complain about spinach not germinating. And then at some point it turned, and we started to get more local people following us. And people always ask me for social media advice. And like, I don't know really what to say, because like, I'm not going out and intentionally like using certain hashtags with certain goals. We're just kind of like having fun with it. Like, I can't really say what that turning point was. We were reached out to by like a local magazine, and it's well known in the area, but not really known outside of this area. And they would ask us if we had any recipes. So like we kind of got some small shout outs that way, which was probably pretty helpful. That like demographic that reads it isn't necessarily the Instagram demographic, or it wasn't however long ago that was. So it's like hard to see that translation.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that I've really liked about your Instagram feed, your farm's Instagram feed, is kind of the evolution and kind of the fun that you constantly are having and like the community that you're creating. So like your Farm Fashion Friday. just that way of showing what people wear on the farm and like it's being able to see farmers and playful. And I think that that's a really great way to build a community online if people are looking for ways to use social media to actually like feel like they're part of something.
Yeah, Farm Fashion Friday is pretty fun. That started from my friend sending me texts of what she was wearing. She works at a hotel in San Francisco. And then I would respond with what I was wearing. And like, I always look like a little boy and she always looked like a sexy librarian. Like it was.
That's amazing. And then it just evolved into something so much bigger than that. That's great. This season of the Urban Exodus podcast is brought to you by Jake.art. Bring the beauty of the outdoors in. A new online art shop brought to you by Urban Exodus. Search our collection of affordable, high-quality fine art prints and illustrations by color or theme to find just the right work for your home or office. Or commission us to do a custom illustration or photograph of a loved one. Visit jake.art, that's JAKE.ART, or click the shop button on urbanexodus.com. So you have been farming with August for 3 years now. What advice do you have for farmers who would like to start a family, but maybe they're worried about balancing parenthood and all of the work related to running a small-scale farm?
I would say that it is going to be as challenging as you think it's going to be, and that's okay. To set yourself up for success, you and your partner should have a clear understanding of like what your responsibilities are and really try to form a community around you that you can reach out to in times of help. We're really lucky to have a lot of family around us that we can lean on in times when we're in a pinch, but we're also very isolated. So it's hard for us to find childcare and stuff like that. Our family had been helping us out with that during the pandemic, but then when jobs kind of started opening up again, they started going back to jobs. So yeah, all of this to say, create a community, and that's a super important part.
I know that recently you stepped back from full-time farming. Your husband still farms full-time, but you have created a position for yourself at Carhartt. I'd love for you to discuss that and what that transition has been like for you.
So it's exciting, and I'm still trying to get over the imposter syndrome that I feel. I didn't go to school for farming, and so it took a while for me to actually feel like I could call myself a farmer and not just someone who had a farm. And likewise, I'm now working on the brand team for Carhartt, and I did not go to school for marketing. I was actually an African American history major. And so all of this is very new to me, and it almost feels like, am I allowed to say that I'm still farming if I'm also working part-time doing this other stuff? So that's just a little like foundation for this. But in essence, we were really struggling to find a balance with how many employees we could have and how we can maintain the farm. And it kind of came to a point where one of us needed to find an off-the-farm job, or as non-farmers call them, a job. And I've been really lucky to have this connection with Carhartt. I'm working as an influencer with them for the past 6 years. And I reached out and asked if they could use help in their social media, specifically on their Pinterest. And I made a deck and I pitched it to them, and they were into it. And so now I'm in my second year doing that. It's been incredible. It's been really fun to use a side of my brain that I was not using with farming. My job is mostly to find images, match them with product, and just kind of stay on top of things that are trending. I'm also helping kind of create their women's voice on this specific platform. And also I'm really lucky to be working with some other amazing women to kind of help create their larger women's voice. And I'm just like a small part of it, but I'm really grateful to be on the team. And yeah, I think it's nice to have someone who is probably of a different background and who is coming from working outdoors all the time, and just that kind of perspective to be able to speak to that, because that's so much of their message.
Absolutely. I feel like having someone that actually is a farmer and has worked with farmers and has built that community is invaluable compared to, maybe someone that went to school for marketing. You're going to have so much more of a understanding of what people need, and just even like product testing. Like you're going to hear from your friends if things aren't working, right?
Oh, definitely. And, with sizing or things they would like, people are always messaging me saying like, oh, Carhartt should do this. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll get right on that. But, it's been really fun to do something different, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So, do you work for them? Is it kind of like a part-time thing? And what are your days like now as far as like farm work? I know you're still working kind of part-time on the farm. How do you divide it all?
It's kind of crazy. We haven't really found a balance, to be honest. Mondays and Fridays, I watch August. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is mainly when I do my Carhartt work. And then starting next week, we're actually starting our CSA up again, and I help out with harvest. So we'll probably rearrange some things so I can do a little harvesting to help out with that. Matt and I divide the duties, and he is insanely fast at weeding. Like, he's gotten so good at everything. It's almost like they don't even need me to be a part of it, and I just like really I'm having a hard time letting go, and I really enjoy the work still. So kind of where I can on days, I'll pop in for like, a 2 to 4 hour block and get some work done. Maybe I'll like wake up with the sun and go out until like I'll do like a 6 to 10, and then I'll come back and we'll switch, and I'll watch August, and Matt will go out and get a lot more work done. And then also on the weekends, we have our parents watch August. My parents usually watch him on Saturdays. Matt's parents watch him on Sundays. He's super lucky that he gets to see his whole family every week. And then we usually take that time. We should ideally be spending it, doing something fun. But in the meantime, in between when we're able to find fun things to do, we're spending that catching up on work or just preparing for the next week.
I love that you pitched this job. You talked about imposter syndrome. And I think so many people feel that in any profession that they're in, even if they went to school for it. What advice would you have to somebody who is looking to create some sort of opportunity for themselves? Maybe they know something really well, even though they've never worked in it, but they really want to work with like a specific brand partner or find a job for themselves. What advice would you give them?
Find the company that you would want to work for, figure out what you could do to help them out and like what you could bring to the table essentially, and then shoot your shot. It's important to make sure you're talking to the right people who could actually do something and not just kind of like mass emailing an entire business. So if you're able to have some contacts or do some research and figure out like who you should be contacting for this specific thing. But essentially, if you come to them and let them know how you could, like, one, how you enjoy what they're doing, and two, how you feel like you could add to it and what you could do for them, then I think that's really important, and it'll be hard to say no.
It's so hard to make a living as a small scale farmer, especially if it's a small operation. Usually requires one partner to have like at least a part-time off farm job. What advice do you have for people when they're starting to realize those pain points? What were the telling signs that something needed to change?
To be completely real, for us, it was being stressed about finances all the time. It always came back to being stressed about that. We were paying our employees, we want to pay a fair wage, but then we weren't really paying ourselves. And got to the point where we kept thinking like, wow, we're working so hard and we don't really have anything to show for it. And not that we need, all these things, like we're not very materialistic, but, being able to afford a pair of running shoes without feeling like you're cutting into like another part of your budget, or, being able to take a day trip on a whim and feel like you're not missing out because you should be working, because this life should be fun. It's not all about work. And I think so much of, the profession of farming is also tied to the identity of being a farmer, that it's kind of hard to take a step back and say like, okay, this is great and I'm doing this, and some things need to change. Like, this could be better. And I would say the biggest advice, which I still need to take myself, so like I'm a little preachy right now, but it's like, it's okay to do both. It's okay to have an off farm job or a job and still be farming. That doesn't mean that you're not that you're failing, that you're not doing it correctly. It just means that this is the realities of the profession and the scale that we're choosing to do. And like for us, we're not really able to scale up. So we're limited by the amount of land we have available. So it's just, part of that was just being realistic with our situation too.
And now you're a farmer and you're an amazing brand ambassador. And so that's pretty incredible that you get to wear multiple hats and seeing that as a benefit and an asset and not as a failure. I think that that's really good advice, because I know a lot of people grapple with that because it is really hard, especially on a small scale, to make a living as a farmer. What advice would you give to young people who are interested in learning to farm, but they don't have access to land or capital investment?
I would say it is still possible. Go out and find a farm and work for them for a season. I really feel like the best way to learn is by doing. And if you're able to find a way to get paid to learn, where you're working on a farm and like you're making money and you're getting all that knowledge, I think that's the way to go. A lot of farms will just hire seasonally. So it would be like spring through fall, and then the winters are usually off. But that's what I did. And I think it worked great for me.
How does Happy Acres Farm look now that you are working part-time? What are you guys focused on as far as production, value-added products into the next year?
I'm a little bitter saying this, but the farm looks so good. Like I like wish I had more to do with it, but it looks so good. Matt has been running it, and I think actually taking the partner aspect out of the managing of the farm and just having one person focus on that, whereas I focus on like the greenhouse and then harvesting, and then I come in to like plant on planting days, but that's just kind of like where I'm able to be. And having one person kind of steer the ship instead of two people, it's just made such a difference. Yeah, our farm looks so good, and I'm just like, I don't have anything to do with it, but damn, it looks good.
Are you still selling at farmers markets, or are you doing boxes? What system are you using now to get your produce to your customers?
We have switched to CSA. We decided to do it before COVID because I think the end of 2019 going into 2020, we had been working farmers markets. And so essentially like weekends, I don't know, for like 10 years. And then you add on the times that we were working for other people before that on the weekends. And it was just like, we're isolated enough out here. I mean, we're only 45 minutes away from our family, but it's not like down the road. And so being able to free up time on weekends, like we really found that what we were missing was that community aspect from our friends and family. And so to free up our times on the weekends, we decided to pull back from markets and just switch to a CSA model. And then COVID hit in early 2020, and we were just like, cool, we made the right decision. Like, this is working for us. Let's keep going.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people had to kind of pivot to that model. Tell us about your olive oil business and that kind of side of your business as well.
So this is a new side of our business, or I guess newer. Matt is half Italian, and so he feels like this is his life's calling, which I fully support. And he had been interested in olive oil probably when we moved into this little house that we rent near the farm. It's just this acre, or this property that we're on, is just dotted with olive trees. And our neighbor has a huge grove in his backyard. And then we started seeing it on hikes. There's just like groves of olive trees planted all over the hills of Sunol. And so we just kind of, we got swept away in it. And one of our friends told us about this person who was looking to lease his farmland or his olive grove. He was not a farmer himself. He was just a landowner. And we were one of several people that applied for it. It's been a little interesting in the sense that like the realtor that is representing the homeowner is a realist. He's in like commercial real estate. So he hasn't really had a lot of practice in agriculture or leases involving farms. So there's been some learning that we've had to do there. We signed the lease to 1,200 olive trees, I think 2 years ago. or 3 years ago, and we're just learning so much. It's again kind of like learning by mistake. I'm like embarrassed to say this, but here it goes. We didn't know where the irrigation was for any of it for the first like 2 years. And then Matt found it one day because he turned it on, and then it was on all night, and then our car sunk in the mud.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I think that these stories make people feel better, right? Because everybody has these experiences. There are just all of those times where you're like, oh, okay, good to know. Was it a drip irrigation system? Was it buried underground? How did they?
It was drip. It was just like not clear where the headers to each section were, if that makes sense. And then when we were finally able to identify them, we turned them on, and one of them had a leak. Like the main line was just cut, and so it was just gushing out of that area. And like that soil must have been very dry because it sunk down super deep to the point where like the top of the soil didn't look different, but when we drove our car on it, it really
It's quicksand.
took hold. Yeah.
What advice would you give to farmers who are expecting their first child on things to be aware of, to plan for, or just ways to occupy little hands while you're out working in the fields?
I would say for moms, don't feel pressured to rush back. I definitely went back too soon, and like I think I started bleeding a little more, and it kind of caused complications. Whereas if I had just kind of like held back and waited a few more weeks, I would have been all healed and ready to go. And for partners, I think just like knowing that you're keeping in mind that your partner is likely dealing with like some FOMO and guilt from not being able to contribute in ways that they used to contribute. So it's such a hard thing because it's kind of like the farm is your first child, putting so much time and energy into wanting something to be successful, and then having to 100% take yourself away from it, but not actually take yourself away because you can still see it all the time and like your partner's still there. It's an interesting thing. And I would say, I think a big question I get a lot is, how much dirt does your kid eat? And the answer is tons. And like, I think farming childhood, like, man, if I could be a kid again, I would want to be a kid on a farm. It just seems so fun. Like you can eat almost everything around you. Well, we're on a vegetable farm. I don't know about animal farms. That would be really fun too, though. And there's just so much room for exploration and independence,
How has, the pandemic been with August juggling? I mean, is he in childcare, or how have you been handling like balancing it all?
Horribly. We're not great at balancing it. It's crazy.
Oh, good. It's not just me.
Yeah, I think I was telling you before we started recording, like, I wake up and I'm like, it's Groundhog's Day again. Like, we're just kind of doing it. We're really lucky that we have family close by. So my sister-in-law has been coming out once a week. It had been on CSA harvest days to watch him so we could harvest. And then the rest of the week is a real pass back and forth. Like morning, someone's watching him. Afternoon, someone else is watching him. Or we'll try to like take him for a whole day if we can.
One thing I really, really appreciate about you and Matt is how you are using your platform now to really be a farmer and an activist. And I'd love to get your thoughts on what fundamental things you think need to change in agriculture in order to have a more equitable and environmentally conscious food system.
Things that maybe seem separate from like a distance, but they're actually so interconnected. I think that like to start, farm workers need to be paid more in general. I know that there's like a lot of farms that will pay per bucket of something harvested or per head of something harvested. And like, I would not want to work like that. And I don't think that's sustainable. And I think like, in addition, I think for that to happen, that food needs to cost more. But then for food to cost more, there's that accessibility issue, where you don't want food to be inaccessible to people. So then it's like the minimum wage should be raised. And And then within all of that, there's education that needs to happen about like, this is what it takes to grow food. You know, you've only paid 50 cents for an onion in the past, and like they should actually cost, you know, maybe like $1 or something like that each. And it's a pretty tangled system right now, it seems. If you're not able to control different parts of it yourself. Like we only have one employee, so we're able to pay her living wage. We're also able to pay ourselves, which is new and huge. And we're also able to charge what we want for our food, which is really unique. Not a lot of people, like when we're at the farmer's market, we have to just kind of charge the market rate. We go around and see what other people are charging and base our prices off of that because we're not trying to undercut anybody. But having a CSA, we're able to kind of price things at what they actually cost to grow, which is nice. And people are down to pay that in this area.
Yeah, I think the small scale agriculture, the models, just like the numbers models, seem to make more sense, especially when it comes to like paying a living wage. I guess it's looking at farming not as a typical, you know, capitalist, like money making business, kind of taking that out of it to a certain degree. You've been using your platform to speak up for farm workers and to amplify voices of BIPOC farmers and speak out on the many social, environmental injustices in our food system. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the positive and negatives of social media in your life and advice for others wanting to use their platforms for good.
I will say the positive, like for starters, the big change for me was last year, just like realizing that I could be more serious with what we were sharing, and that if people are interested in what I think about, you know, tomatoes, that they may also be interested in what we think about farm workers' wages or something to that. I think for so long, like, not that anyone necessarily has told me this. I mean, they have in messages, but like, you know, stay in your lane, stick to what you're doing. And like, I kind of would be passive and not push back on that. And then at a certain point, it was like, well, I don't care. This is my platform. Like, if you don't want to hear it, leave. So yeah, that was like a big change. And I think just like, yeah, realizing that we should be talking about more, way more than just farm fashion. Like that's a fun, but it's like an entrance into something bigger, I think. The positive sides for me about social media are connection for the community in what had been like a pretty isolating job prior to social media. Like when I had been working for the farm before, I think my last year there, I got Instagram and I didn't really understand it. I was like, it's a place that you put pictures. Like on Facebook, you update your status. I don't understand. Then by the end, I was like, oh, you're a farmer in New York and you can grow this and you're also a woman. And like, I only know men farmers. This is so awesome. So like really that connection was super crucial. And I think the negative part, like arguing with people in messages aside about their certain opinions on things, which I think just comes with the territory. I think it's like there's now a pressure to always educate or inspire. And that's super draining. Like, I do not have any, like, we are not a teaching farm. I very much learn by doing. And so I'm not trying to tell people like what our soil mix is because I don't know if that's going to work for them, you know? And also I feel like Google it. There's so many times that people are asking like, how do you grow these peppers? How do you grow basil? And it's like, yo, the internet is free and you are on it right now. Like, just go to a different browser and look for that yourself. Like, that's what we do, and it works for us.
Have you had to create any boundaries for that? Have you been like, all right, I'm only doing this from this time to this time, or I'm not engaging if people are sending me crazy messages? What boundaries have you created so that it's more manageable for you? Asking for a friend.
Well, for starters, I don't have any notifications for any of it. So I have to go onto the platform to see anything. And then I hit it on, I have an iPhone, so I have to like swipe the screen and then it's like in the second page of a certain folder. So I like really have to go in there to get it. It's not just like at the top of my phone screen all the time, which for me I feel like I have an addictive personality with this because it's once you're on it, it's hard to like stop scrolling and like, duh, they make it that way and they did a great job. But like, I've had to figure out ways to like set myself up so that I don't do that all the time. I also have a timer. Like you can go in and set a timer for how long that you're on an app. So I think my timer is 2 hours. So after that, I can either ignore it and know that I am just like going to be having a social media day, or I can be like, cool, it's been 2 hours. That's a lot of time. Like now back to my real life.
This episode is brought to you by the workshops at How Hill Farm, a new photography and creative workshop series brought to you by Urban Exodus. Workshops are hosted online and at our farm headquarters in Midcoast, Maine. The workshops at How Hill Farm offer learning experiences that encourage you to experiment with new techniques, hone your creative vision, and advance your professional opportunities. Check out How Hill Farm's full lineup of online and in-person offerings by visiting the workshops page on the Urban Exodus website. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your newest venture, Harvest Queens, and what your goals are for that collective, because that's really intriguing and exciting to me.
Thank you. I'm very excited by it too. It had kind of just been this like idea that I had for a while. After working markets for so long, I like saw that there was a disconnect between the customer and the farmer. And there's just like, customers don't have that same sense of seasonality as farmers do because they're not in the fields all the time. And because we're sold tomatoes year round and you can buy pineapples in, places where they don't grow. So I think just the sense of like what's available around you at certain times, I guess regionality was really important to me. And I also feel like farmers do so much already with growing and harvesting and washing and packing and selling that then they also have to tell people how to prepare stuff, how to save it, how to pick a good one. Like it's just so much work for a $2 bunch of carrots, And so I was hoping that Harvest Queen could kind of be that middleman so that it can be that information that people go armed with to the farmer's market so they know how to pick an eggplant and they know how to store it and they can just pay the farmer and kind of move on. Not that they shouldn't have conversations or get recipe ideas. I don't think it should also be on the farmers to educate for the amount that they charge for vegetables,
So what is Harvest Queen doing? Like, what does that model look like for you? And how are you guys going to continue to kind of grow and evolve? You're focused now kind of on California.
Right now it's California and like most specifically Northern California, though we have branched out to a few farms in Southern California, but they're very different growing climates. We are currently a monthly newsletter, except for it's a weekly newsletter. Hello. And, and we do.
It's Groundhog's Day. It's fine.
I need some more iced tea. It's a weekly newsletter where we will share like a recipe. We try to do a vegetable of the month where we'll cover something a little more in depth and talk about how to pick one, how to store it, different varieties and what they do. So like last month we were talking about roots and we got to go talk about all the different kind of beets and like how Chioggia beets bleed less than bull's blood beets. Wow, that's a tongue twister. And just kind of like, maybe this is information that if you have a CSA, you could just copy and paste this page to your e-newsletter or something if you're sending it out instead of like creating all this stuff yourself. We also do 4 recipes a month with the certain vegetable that we're highlighting. And then we've also started to reach out to farmers in the area and we're featuring them in their farms and just kind of giving them shout outs. Because in addition to like the education aspect, it's always kind of it's always kind of bothered me that farmers aren't more in pop culture just because like they do such an essential thing. And it like boggles my mind on like how people can know so much about the Kardashians, but they don't know what's growing outside, or like what's in season. And, I kind of feel like farmers should be celebrities in some aspects because of everything they do and a lot of stuff that people have to go through. So trying to figure out how to like take farmers and normalize them, I guess, for like the general non-farming population. We're trying to figure out things that people can relate with, stories that they can identify with to kind of like get them a little more intrigued in different elements of farming and different people who farm.
I think that's great, especially, I mean, honestly, after the pandemic, people are really starting to understand how delicate our supply chains are. And I think there's just been such a movement of people starting to grow their own food and like actually think about things that are in season, because maybe there aren't those things that aren't in season anymore that are available. And the Harvest Queen seems to have popped up at such a good time where people are really interested in learning. Is it a passion project right now? I know you have a couple of other people that you're working with on your team. Are you guys thinking that this will be a business moving forward, an app or something? How are you seeing this kind of evolving in the future?
Yeah, it is a passion project for now. We're just doing it for free and we're trying to do it in a way that gives back to the farmers too. So like we're giving them these photos of them that they can use for their own social media or publicity in other ways, or giving them shout outs. But from here, like when I had originally had the concept of Harvest Queen, it also had like an event element. And then I completely took that away once COVID happened. But I was thinking like a series of seasonal dinners featuring produce from the Harvest Queens that we were featuring. So maybe now that COVID's gone, that'll come back. We have a few other ideas on how to expand. My team members are awesome. Our photographer is my college roommate, my former college roommate. We've just stayed in touch. She's worked on the farm. She's worked for farmers markets. She's just like super awesome. And our recipe developer is Megan, who she teaches private cooking classes. She volunteered or working farmers markets for us. She would come work for us, and we just got to know each other, and it would kind of just like developed into a friendship. And yeah, now she's doing recipes for us. And so we're just trying to figure out, like, we have all these great ideas, like where to go. So we have some ideas, but I can't say anything for sure.
That's really fun that you have a whole collective. The podcast, honestly, is the only time that I've ever worked with anybody else on Urban Exodus. And it's so nice to be able to have other people who are passionate about food and what you're doing and your vision, and to be able to like brainstorm with them. I'm really excited about what you guys are going to build there. So yeah, everybody who doesn't follow Harvest Queen or know about Harvest Queens,
you can find us on Instagram at Hello Harvest Queen.
How do you structure your days to balance your creative work, this passion project, your farm work, and your home life? Is there a structure to it, or is it just kind of every day is different and you're just adapting?
Yeah, I feel like for this last year, it was kind of every day was different and we were adapting. And now I wouldn't say we take it day by day, but before the week starts, Matthew and I will sit down and just kind of talk through like what he really needs to get done, what I really need to get done. And then we'll just kind of map out the week that way in terms of childcare. And then that's really able to like inform where I'm able to get stuff done from there. In general, I'm way more productive in the mornings than I am in the afternoons, especially after I eat lunch. Like, no, I'm useless. So really figuring out how to utilize those mornings has been key.
I recently spoke with Clara Coleman at Four Seasons Farm, and we spoke about the often overlooked importance of self-care in the farming world. Have you implemented self-care into your routine? And if yes, what are the ways that you care for yourself to prevent burnout?
I had not really been doing anything until a few months ago. Or at least for myself, I started swimming again. I swam in high school and college, and that was just kind of like my go-to form of meditative exercise, you know, when you can just kind of go into your head and you don't even realize what your body's doing. And for so long with COVID, I had not been able to figure out how to reserve a lane at the pool in this little town near us. And then one day I just like figured out that I have to check it 20 times a day. And I've been swimming 3 times a week since then. And it's just like, I feel so good.
That's great. And I mean, farming is such a physically taxing job that I feel like swimming, it feels like it's a very balancing sport.
Yeah, it's really easy on the joints. Like floating feel, I would float all day. Like it's so nice. I will say one other thing that we do for self care is Matt and I go to couples counseling. Like we just call them like little touch ups, but really figuring out like honing in on communication styles, especially when you own a business together and you're parenting together and you're married. Like there's so many different types of communication that has to go on. So figuring out like how to get help for those things has been just so huge. And it's also enabled us to ask for things for ourselves, if that makes sense.
I think that that's really great suggestion for people because it's absolutely so difficult to be a parent right now, just in general, but to also share a business. I myself share a business with my husband, and juggling is an extra ball in the air because you have to make decisions for so many facets of your life with your partner. 2020 was such a hard year on so many levels. What has this difficult time taught you, and what are you carrying into your work?
I think my biggest takeaway that I'm going to try to keep with me is that I can and I will. Because so many times things can feel overwhelming and like my inclination will just be to like shut down until I can figure it out. But it's like, you can do this, you will do this. Like, let's just keep going. And I think that could be applied like to our business, to parenting, when it's like 2 o'clock and you're like, I got 5.5 more hours. Like you can and you will.
Have you noticed people leaving the Bay Area through the pandemic? Or rents starting to go down? Have you paid attention to any of that?
For fun, we'll just like look at houses for sale and then it like we'll be like, cool, yeah, we're never moving because we could never afford that. We did have a few friends move away this year, and that was sad, but they're all able to buy houses like in Sacramento or a little more north towards Tahoe and like certain smaller towns where it's just more affordable. And I don't really think like if we didn't live in Sunol, we would live in Oakland. I don't really think we would like go to another city other than that. But I also don't know if we would be able to farm and live in Oakland with the cost of living there. It is so high. It's kind of crazy on some levels to like not to think that you can never move back to the town that you grew up in.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people feel that way who grew up in cities. So many cities have just gotten so unattainable, basically. You can't buy there, can't rent there, especially if you want to work for yourself or want to work in agriculture, quite honestly. One last question. I am also a native Californian. You work outside all the time and have had to deal with this new fire season. What are your kind of thoughts on California long term and dealing with the climate change?
Scary, I guess. My mom, she's like gone full grandma with how much she worries about stuff, which I love. But she was just sending us articles, I think 2 weeks ago, about how they're already predicting another really heavy fire season. So to get your air filters now because they're predicting a shortage in the summer. So I think it's something that we're just kind of building into our plan for the year. Like, yes, we need masks for COVID, but we actually need masks for fire season too, if not more. And, I'm not sure where else we would live because of the fires. I know that we're definitely not moving to certain areas because they're more fire prone. It's just a big question, especially with the drought. Like, I think there's not been a lot of rain this year. The hills here are already golden again. And it was like 90 degrees yesterday in April. It's just a really bizarre thing. I mean, for farming, we're like, cool, we'll plant things earlier and later in the season. But for quality of life and in our lungs and long term, it's something that we're really going to have to think about.
Have you considered, moving to another state or thinking about leaving California, or is California home and you're going to stay?
I don't want to say we would never move because never is a really long time. At this point in time, there's nothing really that draws us to another state. Like, we just have such deep roots here. My aunt and uncle moved to Maine from California 2 years ago. So we're going to go visit them once this is all over.
Well, I know that you are a busy mom who works like basically 3 jobs, and I've taken an hour of your time, but it was so nice to reconnect with you, and I'm glad you guys are doing good. And what are you going to do? Like, are you all vaccinated? What's like your first thing that you want to do once the world kind of goes back to normal? Or
well, we did it yesterday. We got to go see my grandma for the first time in way too long. My dad's mom. She's fully vaccinated. We're fully vaccinated. And it was just like, grandparents are super special. She's in her mid 80s now. So we've just been wanting to see her for so long. And that was really special. I don't really see us like taking a vacation or anything, to be honest. I'm still a little spooked. Like, I'll eat at outdoor restaurants, but I haven't been to any indoor restaurants yet. That might take me a little while. Yeah, I think seeing people and being able to hug them. I'm a hugger, so that's what I really want. So I want to give you a hug when I see you.
I want to give you a hug. I'm going to give you the longest hug. It'll be almost awkward, but I know that you can take it.
Yeah, but I think that's how we connect, the longer, the better.
Absolutely. And I honestly feel like after the last year and a half, it just continues. So I'm not even going to say a year and a half. I'm just going to say in this time that we're in, we could all use a lot more hugs, a lot more.
Yes.
There's this feeling of kind of humanity breaking down to a certain degree. And I really appreciate all of the people that I interview on this podcast, because you all are the hope to me for what a future could be. So
that is so nice.
I mean it. That's why I do this project. When you say farmers are superheroes to me. They should be celebrities. All of the work that I do through Urban Exodus is just to try to bring eyeballs to people who are actually doing really good things in the world and people that we should be paying attention to. And you and Matt are those people. So thank you so much for the work that you do and for just who you are and for not kind of backing down and saying what you feel and what you mean and what's good, because the work that you're doing is really important.
That is so nice of you. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Helena Sylvester. I am so inspired by Helena's fearless attitude when it comes to trying new things, creating her own opportunities, and using her voice and her platform to educate and amplify the voices of farmers and farm workers. I look forward to seeing what the future holds for this hardworking woman as she continues to build Harvest Queen and Happy Acre Farm's olive oil business. You can find a link to Helena's Urban Exodus feature from back in 2019, links to her websites and social accounts, and additional recent farm and family pictures by visiting our blog on urbanexodus.com. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. Urban Exodus is a labor of love, and it's only made possible by your generous support. Maybe you just discovered Urban Exodus, or maybe you followed the project for a long time. Either way, please consider supporting my efforts so I can keep this going. The first and easiest way is to click the support button at the top of urbanexodus.com and pledge any amount you like. Second, sponsor an episode of the podcast as a business or individual and get a 20-second ad spot in an upcoming episode. Just click the podcast link on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Third, you can sign up for an in-person or online workshop with me or one of the incredible creative professionals through our workshops at How Hill Farm. Click the workshops page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Fourth, you can buy something from Jake.art, our new Urban Exodus online shop. a fine art print or wall art for your home or office, a custom illustration or portrait of your family or loved one. There are so many cool things. Just click the shop page to peruse what's available. Lastly, you can hire me to photograph your business or family, or take one of my online or destination workshops. Click the collaborations page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Another really excellent way to support is to recommend Urban Exodus to your friends and relations. Also by giving a 5-star ratings on iTunes to beat the algorithm and so that we can be more easily searchable. Your continued support will keep this passion project running. I want anyone who feels unfulfilled by career or circumstance to know that they have options and alternatives. All of the work that I do through this project is to encourage people to believe in themselves and to work towards a better future for their community and the planet. Thank you for helping me continue to do this work. You can find Urban Exodus on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditch the city and went country, visit urbanexodus.com. Until next time, I'm Melissa Hessler, and this is The Urban Exodus.